Hi, everybody. We just wait for Elizabeth to join us and everybody to join. Welcome, welcome. If people can say hi in the chat, that would be lovely. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
We just wait for people to join. So today we are very lucky to have Elizabeth Assaf with us today, co-founder of Urban Front, who create bespoke, high-performance, contemporary front doors. Elizabeth knows everything there is to know about front doors and is going to be talking us through the 3 essential factors to consider when choosing a front door for your renovation project. So thank you for being with us today, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having
Just before
me.
we jump into the content, do you want to just give us a little introduction about yourself and why you decided to set up Urban Front?
So I run Urban Front with my husband, and we started the company about 20 years ago now. So we were renovating a bungalow, a 1970s bungalow, and we couldn't find a front door. So my husband decided to make one, and when he made it and we put it on the house, it was a cedar door. We started getting people knocking on the door saying, "Where's your door from?" And we were like, "Okay, so there's a niche here." And we decided, let's just go for it because we really wanted to start a business as well. And we were been renovating houses to get on the ladder, as you do. And yeah, people really liked it. And we just thought, okay, so at the time, about 20 years ago, UPVC was very popular and that's all you ever saw on houses. So our door was quite unusual that it was made out of wood. I think when we made that, it wasn't as good as the doors we make now. But people really liked it, and it was definitely, something that attracted attention. So that's how we started, and we haven't really looked back since.
That's such an amazing story. I just love that you just saw a need, did that for yourself. And I guess that's the same with lots of home renovators now. They're learning what they need through the process of doing the project. And that's amazing that you can offer other people that support to get their own front door. It's brilliant. And I guess that's why you know so much about the process, is because you've done it yourself.
Yeah, over so many years, like we renovated 10 houses, and I think the door was one of the last things we really got into. But in reality, people don't realize that it's one of the first things you need to think about, because there's quite a long lead time, like there is on windows, because people think, oh, the door, I'll just do that I'll do that last. But actually, you need to order it quite early on. I think that was something you asked me earlier about lead times. People don't realize that it can be up to 12 weeks to get a front door, especially when it's made bespoke for you. So thinking about it quite early on, I say to people, really start thinking about your front door when you've actually decided on what you're doing on the outside of your external elevation. So the front of your house, the minute you decide, oh, I'm going to have cladding, or I'm going to have stone, or I'm going to have gray windows, think about the door at that point, because it can change what you would have on the outside of the building.
Really
so that's a big part of the 3 things we're going to talk about today, which is design, security, and performance. I'm starting off with design, which I think is the most important bit and what a lot of our clients care about. So when they come, they're like, oh, I've got cladding and it might be cedar, but I really don't know what to have on the front door. What works? And so I then say, okay, give me, if you've got render, what color is your render? If you've got brick, what is the brick? If you've got cladding, what cladding are you thinking? And if you don't know yet, then maybe you need to decide on the front door and then think about your cladding. And what color of your windows is really important, because I think people think, well, if I have white windows, I can't really have a wooden door, but you can. So it really depends on those 3 things, but also the style of the house, because people forget that the style of the house really dictates what the front door needs to be. So cut in if I'm waffling a little bit.
No, absolutely. You carry on.
So basically, another thing that I think is really important is the layout of your front door. So if, and just before I go on to that, when you're considering the materials that you're going to use on the external elevation, don't be worried about mixing materials. I think people think, well, if I have cedar cladding, then the door should be cedar, but it doesn't necessarily, because what your cladding does over time is very different than what your front door is going to do. So if you're allowing your cladding to gray, then your front door won't necessarily gray. So it's going to be a different color anyway. So these things are quite important to consider. And I think a lot of people say, well, if I'm having cladding that's black, do I necessarily have to have a black door? No, you don't. You can have anything you want. And a lot of things work with black. So it's also thinking about colors as neutrals. So black and white are neutrals. Some of the woods are neutrals. So then lots of different things work together, but definitely putting them all out in front of you. So laying everything out, doing like a little layout of the brick, the color of the windows, everything out in front of you, and the woods that you're thinking of, or the colors you're thinking of. Just put them all out there, because when it's right there in front of you, it's so much easier to make a decision.
Yeah.
So moving on to side lights and front door. So if you're having just a front door and no glazing by your door, that's pretty much quite simple, because if you need light in your hallway, you put a vision panel in the door. But if you'd like the glazing on either side of the door or on one side, that's quite important to think about, because I think a lot of people think that if the house, no matter how the house looks from the front, maybe the door should always be central. But that's not necessarily true, because if you put a side light on one side of a door, that's more contemporary than having a door with two side lights. So I always say, unless your house is pretty much is double fronted or balanced, you don't have to have a door in two side lights. It can be just a door. And I actually believe the size of the door is important too, because people tend to go quite small, but actually the bigger the door, the better. And I always say, if you can go as high as your windows in height, and if not, because the house is built maybe in the 70s and you don't have that, see if you can get the height increased. And if you can't, then go wider, and don't worry about it looking dumpy. I think a lot of people think that if I have 2.1 height and I go for a really wide door, that's going to look a bit strange, but it doesn't. It can work really well. And the wider the door, the more impressive. So yeah. I always say, even if you have glazing, try and go as wide as you can. So say you have a 2-meter opening width. If you can go 1.5 on the door, amazing. I think it really works well. So the other thing I wanted to mention about design is the interior finishes. I think a lot of people also just concentrate on the outside. So your external elevation is important, but it's also important what you're having inside. So if, for instance, you're choosing a cedar door, but your flooring on the inside is oak, or you have a staircase that's walnut, that can make a difference. And and although I am a big believer that you can mix woods, and that's not a problem, it is important that they all work together. So when you lay out for your external elevations, lay out for your internal elevations too. And also keep in mind that, with our company, you can have different finishes on the front and the back of the door. And a lot of our clients take advantage of that, because it can really help you achieve what you want without compromising. So if you want the outside to be cedar because you've got cedar cladding, or, black because you've got black cladding or whatever, you can have the inside of the door white, or an oak with a white oil, or, a color if you prefer. So there's so much you can achieve. And I think one other thing about design is think about the little details. So what do you care about when you look at your house? Do you want the door to blend into the front of the house, or do you want it to stand out? So if you want it to be bold, you could go for a yellow and completely be, wow, this is my door. Or if you have black cladding and you want the door to kind of disappear into the black cladding, just go black on the door, and think about the detail, like the handle. Do you want the handle to be concealed so it also disappears? Or do you want something that makes more of a statement and you want it to be bronze? So all those little details make a difference on the entire end result that you're going to get with the door. And also think about things like the detail of how the door frame joins the glazing. So do you want us to hide the glazing in our frame? Do you care about the thickness of the frame? Do you want the door to be flush so that there's no visible frame? There's so many things you can do to make it even more designer, even more bespoke to you and what you prefer. on the front.
That's amazing. I was just thinking, like, I'm just going to quickly share your gallery because I think it will be really helpful to just have a look at some of the things that we're talking about. You have an amazing gallery of inspiration on your website, which I have been looking at a lot. Can you see what I'm sharing there? Yes.
Yes, I can definitely see
I would just really like this kind of concept of what you're talking about, of having, you know, if it really matters to have to the house to have that even side light either side, then you can, but just how contemporary this one with the pale blue looks with just the one side light at one edge, it does make such a difference. And I just wanted to go down to my absolute favorite front door.
You've chosen
I've chosen one already, but I just thought it was interesting because, I mean, this is lovely. I guess just even a small side light can just on this can just give it a little bit of a wow factor. But I absolutely love this front door, and I thought what's really interesting about it is, you know, I can see that's kind of like a 1950s or 1970s house. And I guess instead, you know, maybe originally, maybe there was only space for a door there, but kind of widening and considering the whole front of that hallway space as the front door just changes changes everything about how you view the entrance space.
And also one really important point on that. So you can see where the door is, but right next to the door, it's cladding. It's not actually a boarded panel.
Right.
That's because they had a wall there and they didn't want the wall to be visible. They wanted to hide the wall so it looked like a big area for the front door. And then we just used cladding. So we just sent them cladding that matched the door to go by the side of the door. But they've done it flush up to the frame so that you can't really tell that it's a wall there.
Yeah.
But on the inside, they've also put cladding so it looks the same. Do you see what I mean? So you can actually leave it as a wall on the inside, which some of our clients do.
This whole area makes that space feel really special and like a real arrival area, which I really liked. And then also I was thinking, you know, probably over the years, a lot of people have put, you know, double entrance. They've blocked that in with another entrance door. I know our house has a PVC kind of double door. But I guess if you're upping the performance of your door, you don't necessarily need that double porch space anymore. And it just looks so lovely and such a nice arrival space to have that canopy for visitors to stand in without, you know, working their way through a kind of quite tight door.
Yeah. And with double doors, the other thing is a lot of our clients still come asking for double doors. And I always convince them to go for one big door instead, because with double doors, there's always going to be a door that's a slave door that actually doesn't get used. And there's only one door that you use. So that what that actually means is the door that you do use is going to be smaller than if you had one big door.
Yes.
So it is definitely worth considering one big door instead of two, because you just won't use it. And if it's about being able to bring in large items, you can still take the door off to bring in a large item. So it's something definitely to consider. I mean, the biggest door we do is 1.5 meters wide. Wow. And that's massive. So, and a lot of people that do double doors do them at 1.8.
Yeah.
So you're still getting a much smaller door. And I also say a door and a half is actually a very good idea too.
What's a door and a half?
But so that would be, so say you have 1.8, you'd make a door at 1.2 and a half at 600.
Right, okay.
And then you'd have just like a small door on the side, which is, to be honest, I don't think you need it. I think one big door is much better.
Yeah, it really is kind of setting the scene for the whole house. Like you could have a very, very simple elevation, and having that door being super special just lifts the whole building, doesn't it?
Yeah, it warms it up. I think we always say that with wood in particular, what you're doing is you're warming up say, for instance, on this one, it's just render. That's all there is. It's very simple. That's very contemporary. But with the door, you're adding something that makes it a little bit more interesting and gives it value, I think. Yeah. And also says, this is the front door, use me.
Yes, exactly. Welcome. No, it's amazing. Everybody, if you want to go and have a look through some more images, there are lots on the website. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Shall we move on to the next section?
Yes. So I wanted to talk about security because that's a question a lot of people ask about. And you asked me one question earlier about what does your insurance company need actually in reality? So there's three things insurance companies usually ask for. It's a 5-lever mortise deadlock, so just a normal standard lock that has a latch and a deadlock, or a key operated multi-point lock, which could be 3-point locking or 5-point locking, or a night latch.
Okay.
So what we do is we do a 5-point locking system, or a motorized lock, which is 3 points, or a 3-point self lock. And what's the difference between all of these is that you really don't need more than a 5-point locking system, which is, operated by a key on the outside and a thumb turn on the inside. You don't need more than that. But if you like things a bit more, higher security, or just you'd like to have fingerprint entry, then you'd need something that's called motorized locking. And all that means is the door locks as you close it because it's connected to electricity. That's it. That's all. Or a mechanical self lock, which also when you close the door locks itself. Because at the moment, most people come in the house and they lock the door from the inside, right? So those are the options where it locks itself for you. So your door is always locked instead of you having to physically do it. And that's the only difference.
When we're talking about 5 points, this is kind of like there's a rod. I'm guessing this, so you have to tell me. There's a rod inside the door
on the edge of the door,
which you're turning, and it's making connections at more than 1 point.
Yes. Well, yeah, because with a 5-point lock, what you're doing is you're giving the door strength in the corners and also in the middle of the door. Because a lot of people don't realize one of the things that burglars do is they come along to a door and they start knocking on the weak points, which could be the corners of the door, the hinges. They use a crowbar to try and get into the door. And that's why a lot of people try and say, when they're selling doors, they talk about secure by design, which is the minimal that most companies would want to have or achieve for a door, is that it's been tested to a certain level, and that testing is proven to reduce crime by 70%.
Right.
So what you're looking to do is to make sure that it takes a burglar a lot longer to get into your door. That's basically what you're trying to do.
Yeah, brilliant. With
locking. But it's about what you actually need. So if you have gates, you probably don't need to have the extra things on your door. And it's whether, and a lot of people ask about fingerprint entry. They say, oh, isn't that gimmicky? I think it can be, but I have fingerprint entry on my door. And what I found is great about it is that I never carry a key. All I need is my fingerprint. And if you have younger children or teenagers, they can't lose their finger. so when they're out and about, and you don't have to worry that they've lost their key to be able to get in. Yeah. And also it can be overridden by a key. A lot of people think that you can't override with a key. You can. So, it depends on how you feel. But a lot of people now building new houses want their locking to be connected to their smart home system. And you can do that. You can actually, with your fingerprint entry, you can connect to the app and you can open your door from anywhere in the world as long as you have Wi-Fi. So, yeah, so that's quite good. And also, if you want certain people to come in and out during the day at certain times, you can actually put that on your app too. Yeah. So if you have someone coming in to clean or whatever, or staff, they can actually just come in at that time and that's it. They won't be able to come in another time.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. And what else do we need to consider when thinking about security?
How are you going to use that door? I think a lot of people don't always think about the practical parts of it. So, as I said before, do you have gates? Mm-hmm. Are you in an area where you need extra security? Do you really need to have lots of different locks on the door? The great thing about 5-point locking is that it's one lock. You don't have to have a night latch and another deadbolt, which is what I think a lot of people in the UK are used to, because they'll say, oh, where's the night latch on this door? And I'll be like, well, you don't really need one anymore. And also the fact is, when you close that door, even if you haven't locked it, no one can get in anymore. Because you usually have a pull handle. There's no lever handle that will open the door. So it's just thinking about what you need it for. Yeah. How much security do you actually need? And if you have alarms anyway, do you need more than just the 5-point lock?
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, so performance.
Okay, so performance. When we say performance, I think what people don't realize is we look at the life of a door. So if you buy one of our doors, it should really last you up to 30 or 40 years. Now, there's something really important to think about. When you buy a door from us, it's wood, it's not aluminium. So how does it last that long? Because sometimes you look at, like, say, an old church or some of the old houses, the door sticks and it doesn't open properly. And, you're thinking, well, no, it's not going to last that long. But actually, all it's about is about maintenance. Just like you'd maintain a car, you have to maintain things like a front door. So it can be different things. So for instance, if you have locks and hinges, they could need oiling once every few years. It could be something as simple as, it's a wood door, say it's oak. You may need to oil it or lacquer it, depending on how you first bought it. It's things like making sure that you have an overhang over the door, making sure that it's protected from the weather, because that makes sure the door lasts longer. So it's just making sure that you've covered all the different things, but also things like when you choose your front door, are you choosing the door to be pivot or hinged? Now, just in case there's people watching that don't know the difference, a hinged door, it hinges on the side, and a pivot door, it hinges at the bottom, and it allows the door to move that way.
When it's open, it has a kind of slit down the side, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can see down the side. That's what a pivot door is. Now, why does this make a difference on performance? It does because, for instance, a lot of people think about a door that it would keep out all the weather from their home. But with a pivot door, for instance, if you choose a pivot door, it's never going to be weather sealed like a hinge door. So when you're walking in your hallway and you have a pivot door, what's going to happen is you're going to feel that it's colder in that area. So that's about performance. Is that going to bother you? We have a lot of clients who don't care about that. They'd rather have that action of the pivot than they don't really care if there's a little bit more coolness in their hallway. Whereas I say, over time, if you've made your house so insulated and then you go for a pivot door, it's not the best choice really, because you will have a bit of air in that area and it will bother you. There might be a point where you're saying, oh, it's cool in here and I don't really like that. So it's about performance in terms of the type of door you buy, how much maintenance you have to do, how long do you want that door to last. And also in terms of the maintenance, I keep on remembering things and saying them, in terms of the maintenance, if you say when you buy the door, I am going to oil that door every 6 months, but that you will not do it, then maybe it isn't the right choice to go for that sort of door. Yeah. So what do you want the texture and the beauty of oak, or would you rather have a door that you don't have to touch for 7 years because it doesn't need painting except once every 7 years? Yeah. So I think those are the things that you need to consider about performance. I mean, I'm just going to check I haven't left anything out.
There's a lot of people in our community that are interested in the energy improvements, and I thought it was really interesting. We were talking earlier about we think about U values, which is like the energy performance of windows and patio doors, but we don't often think about that for the front door. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So my next point that I forgot to talk about was passive doors or highly insulated doors. So there's, a lot of houses are being built now where they're so highly insulated that you have to buy specific doors for them that have been certified to have a certain U value. And the reason these are great is because obviously, just as I was saying with a pivot door, you don't get that U value. With these doors, you get an even higher U value, which means that door is not going to have any escaping air anywhere. And it's not just the door and inside its frame, it's also how the frame is fitted to the building. Right. So you can get an escape of air in that area. So a lot of these houses are air tested. And so the U value of your door is important. Now, the minimum most people require is 1.4. But actually in a highly insulated door is 0.79. So look at the difference. Wow. So you can go quite high on the U value. And when we say high, it goes down.
Just to be confusing.
So just in case people are wondering what that means. So the higher the U value in terms of numbers, that means the worse the U value is. So you want to go down to the zeros, really. So U value is important. But I find that in the UK, not as much as in Europe.
Yeah.
In the UK, we're not really there yet with people really appreciating the U value.
I think we're getting there. I think through the community and people asking, I think people are kind of, the energy prices have really jolted us all into thinking about this. So it is important to think about and check the U values. And again, it's not just the U value, but it's the air tightness, because any drafts or losing air means that that part of your building won't perform as well. So that's a good question to ask when you're talking to somebody about doors. I was just thinking just about the installation, and say you're having a big renovation and you're thinking like, we'd like this super great entrance space. I guess you need to be having maybe conversations with your structural engineer or your architect to think about making the structure for having a larger opening. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, so definitely a big part is making sure that if you want a bigger opening, if you need an RSJ over the door, how you're going to support the door. Because one thing people do as well is they buy a door from us, but they use their own glazing on either side of the door. And it's very important to make sure the door has the correct support. So your windows can't support the door. So if there's no wall between the door and the glazing, you need a steel frame. And that's something we always advise. And also things like thinking about if the door is big and the glazing is big, is every time the door closes, is it going to create shuddering in the glazing? Yeah. So you need to make sure that door maybe has a door closer. And if you are going to put fingerprint entry in, making sure that you've allowed for electrics up to the doorway from the beginning. So quite early on in the renovation, which is why I say that doors need to be considered very early on, because it's really hard to add these things in last minute, or to break walls, or to add RSJs or, steel frames. So they have to be considered very early on. So talking to your builder immediately about what you're planning is very
because
essential,
that's the structure, making sure the opening's the right size, but then also the threshold is a very important point to make sure that where the wall stops and the door begins is the right level. And I guess they're all
so one thing you'll find in English houses is you always have to step over the threshold because it's actually a step up. But on new builds and extensions now, they have to be level and flush. So if you want it to be flush, you need to check with your builder that you can actually sink what we call the sill at the bottom of the door. Now we can make them without the sill, but not if it's a pivot door. If it's a pivot door, you need our sill because the pivot action sits in the sill. But you can actually, most builders are easily able to sink that so that you have a very flush between the inside and the outside. But if you're not able to, you should always try and be flush between your interior floor and the door. So it's okay if you then have a step out to the outside.
So I guess like they're the things, the structure, the opening size and the floor levels are all those conversations to have early on. Because obviously you don't want your wooden floor. You need to kind of know what wooden flooring you're having and what the build-up should be to kind of.
Yes. So one of the build-ups, most people have like a minimum of 25 mil build-up for their floor, and they're like, well, how do I make sure that the sill of the door is going to be at the same level? So it's just making sure that your builder is very clear about what their build-up is, and say if our sill is 40 mil, you need to make sure that's sunk at least 20 to be able to then meet the floor at 25. So, there's
got to bring all that information
like that are very delicate
and have a proper conversation and sit down and work. Basically, you have to work it out with your contractor and make sure that's correct. And of course, if you have an architect, they could put that information in the drawings to make sure that detail goes as planned. I'm conscious we're at past now, so we have a question which I can answer. Louisa is asking, what is your view about the success of painting a UPVC door and porch if not in a position to replace at the moment, and what type of paint would be best?
Okay, so I know that there's specific UPVC paint that you can use, and I know it's been successful for a lot of people because I have friends who've done this. So it isn't a bad solution if you're not in a position to change your front door yet. It's worth doing. I really don't know how long it lasts, or if it lasts for, say, 20 years or 10 or 15 years, but I know it's a good interim solution and should give you at least 5 to 7 years, because that's what paint usually lasts for. So if it's done properly, it should give you that amount of time. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. And I have seen houses that look so much better when they use a gray paint over the white windows, and it's worth doing. And it's a very cheap option as well, definitely.
I think
so. Why not?
I think it's also interesting, that point of just phasing So when you're doing your renovation, you might have this idea that one day you would like to have this amazing front door, but you've got to get the works done first, and then you're going to save up again. I guess it's nice to kind of have those conversations and think about what you're working towards in the end, when you finally can upgrade to that front door. Because I guess, a front door, a very high quality front door is like an investment, the same as you would do for a set of like nice patio doors, isn't it? It's a similar kind of price point. And I guess what I really think about the front door is it's quite undervalued in terms of the impact that it has, in terms of not only do you use it a lot more than your patio doors, because you're going in and out of it every single day, but also just the effect of the look and feel of your property. And if you're interested in, if you're going to move on from that property, the kind of value that it says about the house, I think it just communicates such a lot about your street appeal and the kind of renovation job that you've done.
Definitely. And I think it is undervalued, because a lot of our clients will say, oh, well, I need to buy this kitchen and the kitchen's £60,000, but then I won't be able to afford the door I want. So it is about making sure you're making decisions about what you think is an important, budget for that. Yeah. And I think people undervalue how much they need to put aside for a door, because, when we started out, no one ever spent more than £1,000 on a door. But nowadays, most people have at least 10,000 in for the door, or anything between 5 and 10,000 in for a door. Even when you're not going bespoke, because you need that to, and I think when you look at the front of a house, you've got the biggest things that you see are the windows, the garage door, and the front door. And most people concentrate on the windows, but the front door is the part that people walk up to and look at for the longest amount of time. Yeah. And also, when you live in a house, you look at that front door all the time. Yeah. You don't think you do, but you do. Yes. And you use it a lot. So, having something that you appreciate and you value while you're living there is important too.
Yeah. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to...
What's the maximum width and height of a door?
Yes.
So, I mean, there is no real maximum. It depends on the company and what they make. So, but for us, our maximum is 3 meters tall and 1.5 meters wide. So that's huge. Mm-hmm. And most houses wouldn't be able to have a door that big. But I know that there are some aluminium companies that make doors up to 2 meters wide and 3 meters tall. So it depends on the company you go to. But, the standard, though, and what most people go for is 1.2 by 2.4. Yes. In case that's helpful.
Yeah. We have another question.
Can you maintain a wood door so it doesn't go grey? Yes, you can. So funnily enough, a lot of people do want them to go grey, and then you'd use something called an antifungal oil, which is what they use on cladding. But if you don't want your door to go grey, there's 2 ways to do it. And none of our doors don't go grey. You either use just a very good oil. We use Waka, and I think some people use Osmo oil. But you can use it with a colour in it too, and that protects it from the UV light. So always make sure you have some sort of colouring in it, but be careful of the colours, because some of them can look a bit fake. So just making sure you choose the right colour. Try it on a couple of samples first. So using a UV protection. But there are clear ones, so you can get UV protection that's clear, or have a color in it to make it last even longer. I wouldn't use the word stain. I'd say an oil with a color, not a stain and then a finish on top.
Brilliant.
Here's another question.
Let me just mark that so
I'll
that
go for and look, even if the entire terrace is still.
People on the replay will need it read out because they can't see these. So is it?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Sorry.
Is it important to keep with the traditional style of the house, Edwardian terrace property, or go for a modern look, even if the entire terrace is still Edwardian and quite original? The original bays have been removed.
Okay, so I'm a little bit different in my opinion here. I think that you should go for what you like, and it really isn't about what's on the rest of the street, unless there's a rule by the council that you can't change your door. But it's really important that the door you do choose isn't completely out of character with the building. So I've found that we've done a lot of houses that have been Edwardian and Victorian that have a contemporary door, because that would suit that house. And one of the things I would ask anyone you'd go to for a door is to ask them to maybe Photoshop a door onto an image of your house for you, so you can see what it could look like. Because, and it's being very careful in the design you choose. It could be that you actually go contemporary, but you go for a color that matches the rest of the terrace. So it's about being very, very clever about the things you do, or going for a contemporary door, but with more traditional fittings on it, or choosing a colorway that could be interpreted as a bit traditional. So there's just a few different things you can do. And just so that you know, in case anyone here wants some help, we do free design service. You have no obligation to continue talking to us or anything like that. If you wanted just some ideas, or just wanted to see what something would look like, or just get some advice, we do that as standard for all of the people that come along and make an inquiry with us. So if you need help, just ask.
Yeah, it sometimes needs like just the eyes of somebody. It's so nuanced, isn't it? Just something very slightly kind of, it is a worry to get something out of, you don't want something to stick out for the wrong reasons. Like if you want to make a statement, that's great, but you don't want it to look kind of wrong. And so getting that kind of design steer is really worth it.
Exactly. So I wouldn't say, for instance, putting an aluminium grey door on an Edwardian building is a good idea. Yeah. I don't think so. But there are more contemporary designs in wood that can look like contemporary classic. Mm-hmm. They're not too contemporary. So it's about, or modern classic. So it's about choosing the right thing in the right finish with the right fittings that could work with the building overall and not look very odd. So you're avoiding the odd look. You're avoiding something that just looks completely out of place.
You do have quite a lot of traditional case studies on your website, and I did notice the Smurf house, which has the yellow front door. So it's a kind of it's what kind of age property? It's a cottage, really, isn't it? Is it kind of?
It's a cottage, and I think it's an 1800s cottage, which they've updated. But they all along, and the house used to be a royal blue, and it's going to be a royal blue. They haven't even finished it. And they wanted it to be very striking and that's why it's called the Smurf house. So putting on a yellow door was meant to be, here, look at me, I'm here. And that's what I meant before about design. You can actually choose to make your door so obvious and so, in your face, and it makes a real big difference to the frontage. And it does. And I think every time we've done a yellow door or a bold door, that house then becomes known as the house with the yellow door. so or the house with the turquoise door, or the house with the red door, because it's not something people choose to do all the time.
Yeah, and what I really liked about that door is that the fact that you can clearly see that it's new and contemporary, but somehow it feels historic. Like there's this. If the Smurf house sounds strange, if you haven't seen it on, it's a popular project on Instagram, but just go and check it out, because it's kind of that way of making something contemporary but tying it into the older building.
And if you notice, the handle on that was made specifically out of terrazzo and bronze, and that really made a big difference for it really helped make that door look a little bit more traditional. So having a big large knob in the middle of the door made that difference. I mean, if you'd put a pull handle on it, it would have changed that whole look. So that's why I'm saying the detail you use is very important. And it's something to think about when you're doing the house, not just the design of the door. What are the details you put on it? So a concealed handle will look a lot more contemporary than a central doorknob, for instance. So thinking about every single detail, not just design.
One thing that I was thinking of, obviously budgets are tight and everybody's, trying to get the most that they can out of every, get the high quality, but as the best value that they can. And I know that you have a little piece on your website, which is, about kind of thinking about ways to keep the design more affordable. And do you want to just quickly talk? I've got a few examples that I'd kind of taken from the website.
Oh, great. I'd like to see what examples you chose for that.
Oh, it just literally from the literature that you had there about kind of, although it would be nice to have this really big door, maybe you could choose a standard size door. And, maybe...
So,
do you want to?
Yeah, so what you're talking about is maybe then looking at a couple of different things to reduce costs, really. So it's keeping your door to a standard size, keeping the finish to something that is on... Like, so the cheaper options, for instance, are in a RAL color or in one of the cheaper woods. So if, for instance, you like a dark woods are more expensive than say a light wood like oak. So what you can do is you can have an oak door in an ebony oil, and that will make it dark, instead of going for fumed oak, which is on the more expensive side of woods, for instance. Going for a ral, keeping the accessories simple, like the simplest accessories, short accessories instead of long. So the bigger the pull handle, the more expensive. So keep it smaller. The standard size really on a door is 1 meter by 2.1. And that is actually still bigger than a standard door in England at the moment.
That will probably feel quite generous, really.
And it will still feel generous. So it doesn't mean that you're compromising so much. It just means that, and also if you have side lights by the door, if you have them made by your window company in aluminium, that's going to be cheaper than us, because wood side lights are more expensive than aluminium. So thinking of things like that definitely will make a difference.
Yeah, that's interesting, like the combination of, if you're getting your windows done as well, to kind of think about how those two things integrate.
And another thing, a lot of people think that if they do a door and a side light, that's going to be cheaper than a whole width door, full width door. But actually, sometimes going full width on your door is cheaper than having both, having a side light. So then what we would consider is have a bigger door, but with glazing in it. And that reduces the cost. And it actually gives you a much more impressive door. So
that's really interesting.
I wanted to mention also, you had a question for me before this started about doormats.
Yes, I did.
I wanted to, that was a really good question. What should I think about my doormat? Because I think a lot of people like to sink their doormat, when you don't have to. You don't have to sink your doormat if you think it's going to cost more money and you think you might not like it in the future. You can then just get, very thin doormats that you put in front of the door. But I think the doormat should always be the size of the door and not smaller, because I see a lot of people put these really tiny doormats in front of their door, and they just ruin the look of the aesthetic of it. So it's definitely worth thinking of your doormat being the whole width of the door and a color that blends with the floor, not with the door.
Right, interesting.
That's my advice.
That's great. One question I actually had as a final one was, I do love the side light, and I would love to have one of those on my house, because I just think I'd like to see the outside, and I'd like, to see the comings and goings. But at nighttime, I think, actually, would I prefer an opaque one? And I saw that you have a mixture on your website, and just wondered what your take on that was in terms of privacy.
Okay, so I really think the sand-blasted side lights, which is what an opaque side light is, are not as attractive as a clear glass side light. I really do. And what I suggest in that case, when you do want privacy and you don't have gates and people can just walk up to your front door, and especially if they can see all the way through your house or up your staircase, I would put a very thin blind on the inside of the side light. You can get them really, really thin, and they can't, when they're open, you can't see them at all. So then you'd only use it at night. Yeah. That's what I'd suggest. And I actually have a really good example of that I can send you.
I'd love that.
Because I believe that is more attractive than an opaque side light. But I know a lot of people still prefer an opaque side light. I just think it doesn't look as good on the outside.
It kind of doesn't look as inviting. It looks like we're private and we don't, no thank you.
Exactly.
I guess if that's the message you want to give.
It's not as nice as clear glass. I think clear glass definitely looks better.
Yeah. And it just kind of looks, it reflects more, doesn't it? It reflects, if you have trees and plant, it seems to kind of reflect the outside.
I think another thing to consider is you can do like etching. So you can put like your name, the name of your house, or a number or something like that. And that's a lot more attractive. Someone's asked, what about tinted darker glass? Yes, we do versions. We do like a gray tinted glass or a dark tinted glass. However, those you can still see through the night. You can still see through them. So when your lights are on, when the lights are on, you can see through. So they're not necessarily the best option in terms of nighttime privacy. They'd be good in the day, but not, because they reflect light in the day, but they don't at night.
I think we're going to have to leave it there because we've come to the end of the time. But
Great.
I just want to say to everybody, there's like such a wealth of information on the Urban Front website. It's urbanfront.com. And all of the kind of topics we've talked about today, you have blog articles, you've got galleries, you've got guides to how to measure your door opening. You've just got such a lot of information on there, and I definitely encourage you to go and check it out. One thing you have, which is also great, is a glossary for knowing all the different terms for all the different parts of the door that you're going to need when you're going to start speaking to people. So yeah, do go and check that out. And obviously for all the inspiration, it's absolutely beautiful. And of course, if you want to speak to Elizabeth, she's very open, obviously, as she said, to talking to people about their door designs. So please do feel to contact them.
Thank you, Jane and Amy, for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today. And I feel super excited about my door that I'm going to be speccing and getting excited about, and I'm going to be checking out those images. So thank you so much. And yep,
no problem.
I'll speak to you another time.
And if anyone has a question, you can just email me at info@urbanfront.co.uk. Just put it for the attention of Elizabeth. I'll be very happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks a lot. Bye.